Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, good morning, good morning, good morning. So glad you're here this morning, both in person in the chapel and, of course, through our Zoom connection or connections. It's the middle of July already, the 18th of July. Hardly seems possible. But nevertheless, that is the case. And so the year is half over. Let us all be making profitable use of it. Just a couple of announcements this morning. The center will be closed for all of August. There will be no Seva Saturday, no talks or classes, evening arati only if it is done by devotees, either here in the chapel or by Zoom. The break is badly needed, I can tell you, and it will be nice to direct my attention elsewhere for a while. Next Sunday's talk, the last before the break, will be Swami Vivekananda's Raja-Yoga. Are there any other announcements that might have been made or should be made? All right. I'm going to sing a little song this morning that expresses what we're doing as we practice Raja Yoga. When we begin our lives, unless we are very unusual indeed, we begin our lives at the second and third spiritual centers. These are the manifestation of duality. They are the creatures of our bondage. So as we yearn to do our spiritual practices, as we yearn for freedom from those limitations, we begin to rise. The Kundalini, the spiritual energy within us, begins to rise and comes through the heart center, into the throat center, into the forehead, into the top of our being, so to speak. So this is a little song that expresses this. Jacob's ladder, of course, is a metaphor for the spine and the spiritual centers within the spine. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, children of her love. Every rung goes higher, higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. Children of her love. Children, do you want your freedom? Children, do you want your freedom? Children, do you want your freedom? Children of her love. Keep on climbing, you will make it. Keep on climbing, you will make it. Keep on climbing, you will make it. Children of her love. She is waiting to take your hand, yes. She is waiting to take your hand, yes. She is waiting to take your hand. Children of her love. Children of his love. Children of their love. Children, do you want your freedom? Yes. Otherwise, why would you be here this morning? So once again, welcome. Once again, it is such a joy to be with you this morning. July is a month for the study of Raja-Yoga, a spiritual path often called the yoga of meditation. A Raja Yogi uses ancient, proven spiritual techniques to calm the body, quiet the mind, and gain control of her or his attention. I'm going to repeat that. A Raja Yogi uses ancient, proven spiritual techniques to calm the body, quiet the mind, and gain control of her or his attention. These are the essentials. Regular daily practice of Raja Yoga increases your ability to concentrate and may lead to meditation. This can unite you with the divine presence, the source of your being, and liberate you from the cycle of rebirth and death. In the vocabulary of the Raja Yogi, this state of liberation is called kaivalya, independence, being independent of all limitation. So we're going to speak of all of that this morning as a three-step process. Self-discovery, self-actualization, and self-realization. Self-realization is one way to talk about the goal of all spiritual practices. It is the entire focus of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. His sutras are the basis of Swami Vivekananda's book, Raja-Yoga, and Swami Prabhavananda's book, How to Know God. You can think of progress toward this realization in these three steps. First, self-discovery. What does it mean to be fully human? If you are bold, you begin to find this out during your student years and the early part of household life, up to about age 30. It's a time of exploration, definition, adventure. If you're blessed to be a spiritual aspirant, it is also a time of breaking through inner boundaries and beginning to feel the living presence that animates you. Next, self-actualization. In this phase, you bring the talents and attributes you have discovered and the spiritual treasures you are finding to even greater manifestation. From about age 30 to age 60, you unfold your career and also may have a successful marriage and bring up one or more children. This is very demanding. This period is very demanding and challenging. As Sri Ramakrishna said, a householder leading a spiritual life is the true hero. Why is it so challenging? Because we have to begin to apply what we've learned in our first 30 years to making a living for ourselves and mastering the game of life so that we don't feel always behind the 8 ball, so that we don't feel always that somehow life is mastering us. We chafe against the limitations. And that's one of the reasons that as spiritual aspirants, we begin to move in the direction of spiritual self-actualization. And the final phase, the final of the 3 phases to be discussed, is self-realization. Sometime during the period of self-actualization, after you have been practicing spiritual disciplines for a number of years, you start to realize the life you are living is merely the surface appearance of the being you truly are. This is what spiritual practice does. It reveals that living presence within you. It is the animation for what you are. That is, in a very real sense, the creator and director of what you are. This is what we learn by doing spiritual practices. You become aware that your outward self, no matter how accomplished or successful, is merely an expression of and evidence for that far greater being that lies within, who empowers all your activities, thoughts, and experiences. You begin to think of yourself as that living presence and know your true original nature. In Raja-Yoga, the Atman. Now, Atman is a term of convenience. It is not different from the word Brahman or Godhead. It's simply to indicate that there is something that seems to be individually present in the seemingly separate beings that we see around us. So we're going to discuss all this in a little more detail. But first, let's just go quickly over these 3 steps again. Self-discovery. When you're young, the people around you make it difficult for you to discover yourself. They do this by what you may have heard from here discussed, a teacher by the name of Don Juan Matus. Don Juan Matus says that these people who surround us, in a well-meaning way, it isn't that they may be self-interested, yes. They may be living through you vicariously, yes, as their children or as their proteges. But basically their intentions are good. So they are trying to recreate you from what you came as into what Don Juan Matus called a member. They're trying to give you a membership in their society. And so it becomes very difficult particularly during your teen years, though earlier too, but particularly during your teen years, to express who you truly are. Some of you know my sister Janice. My sister Janice won a scholarship to the San Francisco Academy of Arts when she was in the very beginning of high school. She was not allowed to accept it. That changed the vector of her entire life. So that's just one tiny example. I'm sure you can find examples in your own experience and in the experience of people you know. So self-discovery is difficult. That's why I said earlier, you must be bold. You must be bold. Self-determination, so on, is difficult. So you get to that period where your prefrontal cortex forms and the decision maker that seems to be the you of you matures between age 26 and 30. And so you begin to compromise. It is a tragedy. It's not that you shouldn't compromise, but you should be doing it out of who you truly are, not out of confusion or going along with the crowd. So in any event, as a spiritual aspirant, you begin to have these yearnings. Usually spiritual aspirants, the desire for these things of the spirit begins when you're right around 10, 11, 12. Sometimes, if you're fortunate, even younger. But then it will grow in you. And it will be a source of friction. So during the period of self-actualization, you turn that friction, tapasya, into a very deliberate thing. You push against the limitations, including the membership you have been given, and you begin to move in a direction that is guided from within, not from the head, but from the heart. Most people never, ever make this transition, make this turn. As a result, the writer, philosopher, poet, Henry David Thoreau said, the mass of humanity lead lives of quiet desperation. The mass of humanity leads a life of quiet desperation. Clearly, that is not your lot. And most of you, as you sit here, as I see, are in that phase of self-actualization, that age of 30 to 60, thereabouts. And so as we discuss these steps in more detail, you will see what it is parallels to what you are doing, and perhaps some things that you might find interesting to do that you are not doing. Self-realization, as we'll see, is very difficult to describe because the self is beyond thought and speech. We can gesture at it. So you'll see what wants to be said about that as we get there. But before we go ahead, are there any comments or questions? Anything to offer from your own wisdom, from your own experience, or any question of clarification that you'd like to ask about this or any other aspect of spiritual practice? Anyone at all?
Anyone on Zoom?
Yes.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes, Aaron?
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to say that in my own personal life, I felt being a spiritual aspirant against the world can seem torturous, being self-determined and like having seemingly the whole world going against what it is you want.
Well, Aaron, it's not called Mahamaya for nothing. Maya is very powerful. It is the dream of duality. And the best thing to do is not be combative with the world, but as Jesus said in his shortest but very poignant instruction, be passers-by. Let the world do what it does, think as it thinks, behave as it behaves. Do not become entangled. It's so easy to begin to feel like this is directed at me. No, it is not directed at you. It is simply the universe being itself in this time and place. And this is a difficult time and place. There is no question about it. But there's no reason to allow it to be overmastering.
Yes. I just would like to add something to that for Aaron's comment and question, that it is hard. And if it seems like the world is against you, it's not necessarily against you. It's just you're going a different direction. And it's hard, especially early on. And if it wasn't so hard, everybody would be doing it. And you wouldn't be experiencing all the pushback. So just if you can remember that and
prize it.
And prize it, yes. And realize that, okay, I know in my heart I'm going the right way, even if nobody around me is validating it. You can't, well, it's hard not to care about the people around us and what they think.
So take refuge in this congregation. Take refuge in these people. These people are on the parallel path. So we are doing this together, as the opening prayer says. Let us study together the art of spirituality. And it is a strength that we can gather. There'll be more about that as we go along.
I'll make a comment.
Yes, Tom.
Brought up by what's just been said. Okay, thinking about my own life, my parents were very worried about me, that I wouldn't be able to survive in the world, that I wouldn't be able to take care of myself because I was too much of a dreamer. And that thing of being too much of a dreamer, was connected with some, you could call it spiritual aspiration. So my parents were legitimately concerned, partially because they didn't understand me, but also a lot of the things that they were concerned about, they were right. I was just sort of like an ignorant teenager. And so there's like a balance between, I guess your parents are the strongest influence in your society, but your society is giving you some good, worthwhile messages, and your parents are giving you some good, worthwhile messages. And also, they're going against you because of the side of you that's a spiritual aspirant or a dream seeker or whatever you want to call it. And it took me years to, Mark Twain said, when I was 20, I was sure my father was an ignoramus, and I was amazed by how much he'd learned by the time he was 40.
Right.
Something like that.
Yes. Exactly. I agree with you entirely, Tom. Much of what is offered to us is well-meaning. And it is, as you pointed out, much of it is accurate in terms of being competent in this world. But what Vivekananda says is all of that is also resident already within you. So spiritual practice brings it out in such a way that you, well, we'll discuss that as we go along. Anything else from anyone? This is excellent.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, please.
Yeah, for me at this stage in my life, the limitations are less from outside. I don't think the world puts as much limitations as my own body-mind complex, the physical issues or some responsibilities that are overwhelming that then lead to mind being disturbed, and overcoming that and sticking with the spiritual practice is the challenge.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's because as you grew up, you learned how to deal with the world and be successful in the world. And so its limitations were not so much a bondage for you as you were master of that situation to the extent that any of us can be master of the universe before realization. So yes, as we come to our spiritual path, that becomes the challenge. We must be, as you'll hear, a mature, stable person in some way in order to not have the world constantly seem like it's overmastering us. Thank you, Swayam. Anything else? All right. During the youthful time of self-discovery, if you are a spiritual aspirant, the yamas are likely to take up a good deal of your attention. Now we're talking in terms of Raja-Yoga and Patanjali's definition of the steps or limbs of yoga. Yama means restraint. For most of us, the yamas involve first discovering, then actively working to curb those self-centered tendencies that keep us at odds with the world. When you have an adversarial relationship with the world, a self-centered one, the world seems very, very difficult. But when you are harmful to others or the environment, deceitful, greedy, or selfish, immoderately sensual, or covetous, you also must be, to one degree or another, anxious, on guard, always seeking to protect yourself, gain an advantage, satisfy one more desire. Living this life of the prodigal child can be fun in many ways, yet it's ultimately self-defeating. Why? Because calmness of mind in that way of living, calmness of mind is impossible. A calm mind is essential for spiritual progress, not to mention an immeasurably great aid in becoming the self-confident, self-determined, self-sufficient adult that we all wish to be. These attributes of calmness of mind, self-determination, self-confidence, self-sufficiency. These attributes are what's needed to develop a healthy, mature ego. And without a healthy, mature ego, which we all come to in our own ways, otherwise we feel we live those lives of quiet desperation. Without that healthy, mature ego that is not overmastered by the world, it's virtually impossible to go ahead in spiritual life because we're constantly anxious, constantly agitated, constantly on guard. Yet, as you become less small self-centered, what will you be instead? According to Patanjali, as you move into the self-actualization phase, as as a spiritual aspirant, the niyamas probably will deserve more and more of your attention. Niyamas are the observances suggested by Patanjali that focus your mind on your internal world of body, mind, and spirit. Practicing the niyamas, you make daily, determined efforts, and I can't underline that enough. If we're going to replace this small self-centered way of being, it requires daily, determined effort. Whatever it is that is your version of this, it isn't something you can do on Tuesdays and Saturdays and leave the rest of the week to itself. In the terms that are sometimes used in the Christian world, you can't just be a Sunday Christian. You make daily determined efforts to eliminate the various forms of inner and outer impurity. Now, those are represented by the yamas, about all of those small self-centered activities. They're forms of impurity. You strive, and I do mean strive, you make real effort to be content with the circumstances of your life. Does that mean you don't try to get a promotion at work? No, that's not what that means at all. It simply means that if you don't get the promotion, you don't feel like anything's wrong. You don't feel that you're somehow have been disadvantaged. You seek to see, perhaps I didn't need those extra responsibilities. I didn't really need that extra money. Perhaps I'm better off having fewer responsibilities, even though it means a little less money? How can I be more careful and more thoughtful with the money that I'm entrusted with? This is all the part of these observances, the niyamas. And one of the most difficult, to prefer the good over the pleasant. Now, this involves that that pairing of words, viveka and vairagya. Viveka means seeing which is the good and identifying that which is the pleasant, and allowing yourself to make the choice of the good rather than the pleasant. That's the viveka. That's the vairagya, letting go of the pleasant. The viveka is the discernment. Vairagya, the letting go of the tendency, that habitual tendency to take the path of least resistance, to choose the way that is going to be most comfortable. It's so easy and so stupefying. So we must be at the edge of our comfort zone and pushing beyond it to prefer the good over the pleasant. And this is what Patanjali speaks of in chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras, of replacing the lower samskaras, those habits of mind, those mental impressions that keep being activated by the gunas, that keep us doing the same thing over and over. Replace those with higher samskaras, different ways of being. How do we know what these higher or better ways of being might be? We learn from sacred texts and from fearless yet self-forgiving recognition of our own weaknesses and mistakes. We say, I have a weakness for eating too much. It's less now, but it definitely was there when I was younger. Eating too much and too much of the wrong things. It resulted in me having open heart surgery because my arteries were clogged. So it's this being willing to look. What do the sacred texts say is a more productive way to be and live? And then looking at your own way of thinking, speaking, and acting, and see how those match up. And then being willing to move away from those things that are limiting you toward things which are less limiting. And the last of the niyamas, and this as a spiritual aspirant becomes very important, because it is in this that you release your karma, you release the results of your actions. You offer every aspect of your life and all it contains, including the results of your spiritual practices, to the divine presence. Now, why does this become possible? How does this become possible? Because you begin to realize that you, as you continue your spiritual practices, that is who you really are. That living presence, that divine being is who you really are. And so you then begin to say, you are the creator of this. And so I offer the doing and the results. I offer the thinking and the results of the thinking, the speaking and the results of the speaking to the divine presence. I, an embodied being endowed with life breath and their functions, now offer up all my actions to the Godhead. No matter what I may have done, said, or thought, in waking, dreaming, or dreamless sleep, may all that be an offering to the divine presence. That's one mantra or prayer for making that offering. You offer every aspect of your life and all it contains, including the results of your spiritual practices, to the divine presence. As your practices reveal that living presence within your heart, and you begin to understand from experience that presence within you is yourself, this prayer may become a favorite. You are the source of infinite energy. Fill me with that energy. You are the source of infinite strength. Endow me with that strength. You are the source of infinite courage. Inspire me with that courage. You are the source of infinite fortitude. Grant me that fortitude. Now, before we go ahead and to the last section of this, the self-realization, are there any comments from your own wisdom or experience, or any questions of clarification? Anything to add or ask? That's our Zoom.
Brother, this is
Yes,
Gaurav.
yes.
The more I pursue this path, I'm starting to realize like I'm kind of doing my job. I'm blessed with the skills that I have, and I do my job fairly well according to my bosses. But I'm starting to realize that I really am not, I'm losing ambition to take the next step, do the next thing. My parents keep telling me, yeah, you got to move on. My wife is telling me, do that. But I am losing that drive. I'm starting to feel that whatever I'm blessed with is all God's gift to me. And I'm kind of reached a level where I feel like I'm satisfied with everything I have. And I'm thankful for everything He's given me. The more I pursue this path, I'm losing that urge to get more money and more, more wealth. I don't know how to put this.
No, you're doing fine. This is very clear what you're saying. Let me just make this suggestion. As you pursue your work, see the people that you work with, the people you work for, that is to say, the people you report to, and those who own the company. See them as the divine presence and offer your work and your every effort to that divine presence. You don't need to say anything to them about it. Just have that attitude as you go to work each day, as you drive to work or commute to work, however you commute. Just hold that thought. I am taking this day and all it contains, and I am offering it to the divine in the form of the people I work with, I work for, and the people who ultimately gain by the productivity of this company.
Okay, will do.
Two things will happen. First of all, you will become more lighthearted about the work that you do. The second thing is you'll be more successful at what you do because you'll want to do it that much better because you're doing it as a yatra, as a sacrifice, as something you're doing for and with the divine presence.
Should I kind of force myself to seek my professional well-being, move out of the company, or
you don't
do
need
nothing?
to do any of that.
I'm not feeling that urge, like the hunger
No,
to
this,
achieve greatness.
This is a completely different direction than forcing yourself to do anything. You invite yourself to recognize the truth.
Yes.
That you're not doing this in order to.
Yes.
You're doing it because you're recognizing the truth of the divinity. Now, every one of the scriptures, no matter where you look,
Yeah.
says that you're surrounded by divinity.
Yes.
Christ says, it is within you and without you, though without you, you see it not. So invite yourself to see it.
Okay.
And then just stand back and watch what happens. At the very least, your relationships with everyone at work will improve. Not in a week, not in a month, but within a year.
Okay.
If you do this every day, and then see what other rewards are there. And you're not doing it for the rewards.
No, I'm not.
And that's very good. That's commendable.
I do the work because I love the work. I mean, the work itself is a reward to me, pretty much.
Good. That's very few people are so fortunate as to be able to say that. Now do it with this frame of reference.
Okay.
See the wonders that may occur.
Got it. Thank you, brother.
You're most welcome.
People has a question.
Yes.
Are you still there, people, with a question?
Yeah. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Yeah. Brother Shankara, we are discussing yam and niyam. Let me give my 3 limitations. I need all the year resolution is I need to be more disciplined, organized, and less procrastinator. So in these 3 parameter, what is a yam here and what is a niyam? That I'm able. What is yam actually? Niyam I understood little bit is like you need to discipline yourself. But what is actually yam? What is a restraint or what you discuss?
It means not being harmful to yourself or others. It means not being greedy. It means not being deceitful. It means not being covetous. All of these things that are the shackles. Now, it's likely that you're already pretty much like that. So, but the ego and its manifestations are subtle. So then you begin the niyamas, the observances, and you begin to say to yourself, oh, I see some impurity creeping into my motive here. I see that I'm doing this so that I can get an advantage. So you admit that to yourself, and make a decision. Shall I persist in that behavior or not? And so you talk about being a procrastinator. Procrastination is lack of motivation, lack of zeal, or lack of energy. Sometimes it is simply that we do not have the bandwidth to do everything that we're committed to do.
Okay.
And this is where I said there has to be a kind of fearless self-inventory. Am I overcommitted? Have I promised to do more things than I'm really capable of doing? And should you condemn yourself for that? No, it was probably well motivated in one way or another. But in a self-forgiving way, say, what can I do about this? And if you have that habit of overcommitment, and oftentimes active people do, then begin to withdraw from that practice and just do those things that you can do with a feeling of commitment and even enjoyment. But by all means, don't call yourself names. As Swami Swahananda told us over and over, laziness, procrastination, what it really is lack of zeal.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
lots of things. Yeah, they say like lots of thing is with your prakriti or your own attitude or swabhav, and they say you cannot change few of the attributes that you come with, born with, and it's very hard to get rid of those type of tendency. So is it worthwhile, miss, how to distinguish between those things and yam and niyam and that type of thing, like because they say some of the thing that you cannot get rid of, or tendencies that you cannot get rid of, something like that, they say, okay, that's called prakriti or something.
Well, Krishna talks about that in the Gita. Yes, we all have certain tendencies. We have to learn to maximize the possibilities of those tendencies and minimize their negative effects. Within this realm of duality, everything has its positive possibilities and its negative possibilities. So if you have certain tendencies of overcommitment, for example, that is, it's not that it cannot be overcome. It can be overcome.
Okay.
But it's a matter of it's a matter of substitution, not elimination.
Okay. Okay.
Substitute something better with that tendency. You substitute a way of making it work for you. And only you can determine what that is, though you may talk to others who are experts in whatever it is that you do, and see how your inherent tendencies and capabilities and attributes. Just remember, dear, that you are an embodiment of that which created this universe. Swami Vivekananda says there is no limit to your possibilities. No limit. You are an embodiment of that which created this entire realm of being. So how can you find, and if you remember, there was a prayer a little while ago, you are the source of infinite energy.
Yeah.
Endow me with that energy, and so on. You can go back and find that in the recording, and also the notes will be posted along with the talk. So if you want to find that little prayer, you can find it.
Yeah.
And then repeat that prayer. As Swami
Okay.
Vivekananda says, the answer to our prayer does not come from some deity sitting on a cloud hurling thunderbolts or boons. It comes from within us.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes, it's very great talk. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and very good question, very good concern.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Swayam
Um,
Swayam, yes?
yes, Brother Shankara, I went through a phase of kind of a confusion when I was not engaging with the world with, either my work or seeking another job. I was wondering, is that more of a tamasic, because I wanted to run away, didn't want to face conflicts. So I went through the confusion, but now I feel that that is really not the case. I am drawn to learn more about myself. That is what makes me want to not engage with the world, because I feel like I want to devote more time to self realization. Is that
That's,
a right assessment that I'm doing?
yes. Never yield to that self-accusation. Anything that makes us smaller, that contracts us, is all of that, Vivekananda says, is death. Anything that expands us, that in which there is less limitation, that is life. And so your desire for something different naturally led you to stop doing what you had been doing because it wasn't satisfactory. As Tukaram says, only a fool kicks their lover out of bed unless he knows that he has two more on the way over. We only abandon what isn't satisfying us when we're sure something in us tells us that there's something better. So congratulate yourself, not think about, oh, tamasic this and that and the other. Look what's become of you instead.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything?
Brother Shankar,
Yes, Bhagarat.
this is a very complex issue because life as such is a substrate on which so many sources and factors start acting and shape you and de-shape you. And you do not know what is good for you and what is bad for you, because on one side, the parents want you to study and be smart. On the other hand, the body demands a kinetic growth. The body wants to make sure that you are developing it into a healthy, sustainable force. That's where the competition comes. This is a word which I think is a root cause of many problems. That even in the growth, even when you are in the sports, I do number 1, I do number 2, I do number 3. When you study from the school, oh, your report card is good, but there are 2 B's in it. Why not A? The other one had all the A's. So that way, gradually, we are contaminating a beautiful mind and luring into a path which is not good. Not only that, but sometimes in India, the parents instill some very destructive things. For example, they would say, every day you do this part, this sutra, and you will have nothing to worry about your billions. Which is wrong, which is very wrong. Everyone has to do one's own thing. But that kind of thing is never given to begin with. And by the time you realize, like in the second and third stage, it's too late. It's too late in the sense that you are not born with those qualities, but those qualities have been so deeply instilled into you that they spring back at any time and not to your advantage.
Oh, yes, indeed. That's true. And so this is why Sri Ramakrishna says the householder leading a spiritual life is the true hero, because they have to battle with that membership that they've been given and see what they can make out of it as a way of life, as a way of livelihood for their family and themselves. And at the same time, they have to try to manifest their higher being. They're fighting with a sword in each hand and no shield. So this is why Sri Ramakrishna says the householder is the true hero. The householder leading a spiritual life is the true hero, for just the reasons that you said, Bhagavad. And so it is not easy. The principles are relatively simple. The practice is very difficult. That's why there are so few champions in any sport, in any endeavor. There are so few who are maximally successful. I just finished watching a series done by Ken Burns on the sport of baseball. It is astounding how difficult it is to get a spot on a major league team and then to hold on to it for any length of time at all. How hard you have to work, how much you have to want it. And it's spectacular when it manifests. And these great stars, these Babe Ruths and Ty Cobbs, and sure, there's some native ability, but oh my God, that's just the raw beginning. So many have native ability. How few have the ability to take that and discipline it into a true champion. So every one of us in this room, every one of us on that Zoom screen there has that potential.
Yep.
What does championship mean to us? Well, we're about to discover that. We're about to discuss that in this section on self-realization. But there's no reason to rush ahead. If there's anything else anyone wants to say or ask or contribute, please do. All right. Self-realization. I'm just going to repeat that prayer, by the way. That prayer. You are the source of infinite energy. Fill me with that energy. You are the source of infinite strength. Endow me with that strength. You are the source of infinite courage. Inspire me with that courage. You are the source of infinite fortitude. Grant me that fortitude. You are addressing that being within that has the creativity, strength, fortitude, being of the universe itself to share with you. Self-realization. In 1896, in 1896, Swami Vivekananda wrote Raja-Yoga as a guidebook for Westerners who had more than a casual interest in self-realization, pointing directly at the purpose he had in mind. Vivekananda said or wrote, "Every soul is potentially divine. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details." Swami Vivekananda yearned for each of us to access the illimitable source of knowledge within, your everlasting birthright, and manifest your infinite divinity, your innate divinity. Raja Yoga, the yoga of psychic control or meditation, and other special techniques, is one gateway to your birthright, one path by which you can overcome this world. You can take the inner subtle knowledge of cause and effect gained by Raja Yoga's practices and turn it into ever more capable and efficient action in the world. As Swami Swahananda often said, the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. So I'm going to read that again. Raja Yoga, the yoga of psychic control, of meditation and other special techniques, is one gateway to your birthright, one path by which you can overcome the world. You can take the inner subtle knowledge of cause and effect gained by Raja Yoga's practices and turn it into ever more capable and efficient action in this world. As Swami Swahananda often said, the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. And one thing for us to keep in mind, we live in a realm of duality. It isn't real, but it is relatively real. And so we must master that. As Vivekananda said, you are not the slave of matter. Matter is your slave. So there's a great inherent duality in what he says, but the power that allows you to be master of yourself is unitary, is beyond the apparent duality. So there's no sense denying the duality, even when you're practicing meditation, except for those few moments when you lose your outer consciousness altogether. There is the experiencer, that is the meditator, the experience of doing whatever you're doing to practice meditation, and the experience that results in. the experienced. So experiencer, experience, experienced. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master says, what is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. How long should a man perform his duties? As long as he has not attained God. Duties drop away after the realization of God. Then one goes beyond good and evil, the duality. The flower drops off as soon as the fruit appears. The flower serves the purpose of begetting the fruit. But one who has attained perfection, realized God, cannot commit sin. An expert singer cannot sing a false note. I'm going to read that again. This is from Sri Ramakrishna. What is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. How long should a man perform his duties? As long as he has not attained God. Duties drop away after the realization of God. Then one goes beyond good and evil. The flower drops off as soon as the fruit appears. The flower serves the purpose of begetting the fruit. But one who has attained perfection, realized God, cannot commit sin. An expert singer cannot sing a false note. So any final comments from your own wisdom and experience? Your own way of being? Or any questions of clarification from anyone? What does it mean?
Brother Shankara.
Yes, Fred.
Hi. Hello, everybody. It just occurs to me that lately I've been feeling a catch or a impediment to moving forward with a fear of being on the edge of my comfort zone. And after listening to the class and everybody's comments, it suddenly occurs to me that's false. That's a distraction. That's not real. Anyway, I'd like to get your comment on that.
What a wonderful insight. Yes, our left mind and the limbic system that underlies it is expert at keeping us safe according to its own definition of safe. And so when we begin to push beyond our homeostasis is a medical term, but we are not separate parts. We have this great tendency to try to maintain what has worked before, even though it is less than we are capable of and less than we even want. So our comfort zone is a myth. It's a myth created by, as you just said, Fred. It is a myth. It is a distraction created by our left mind that says, if you go beyond here, you won't be safe. I don't know what to do. That's not me.
Exactly.
And yet, if we push beyond, I mean, people have nervous breakdowns because the left mind doesn't know how to cope. Well, you'll get through it. It seems like the end of the world at the time. You'll get through it. Is it easy? Not in the moment. Are you glad afterwards? Yes. The past, untrue or true, as I recall it, what does it matter now? All that became this moment, this crouching, pregnant moment. We are glad when we see clearly. We are glad of everything that happened to us because it brought us to this moment, this crouching, pregnant moment. So push on, Fred.
Will do. Thank you.
Brother Shankara.
Yes, Uma.
Good morning.
Good morning, dear.
Yes, I wanted to add something to what you last said about those who reach that self-realization state. I think very, very few, rare people like Ramakrishna, Raman Maharshi, or Swami Vivekananda, and such rare people who could make it all the way to the top. And at that stage, I think they do not cease to work. They do not cease to function as human beings. In other words, there is no vacation from work. The only thing is that their attitude to work changes. Their response changes. Just like in Tao Te Ching, it is said that you chop the wood, you continue to chop the wood to hold the water, but still life changes. Your entire outlook to people, to yourself, to life undergoes a deep change. Nothing, everything is the same that you do. You continue to do your duties. Because as Krishna says in the Gita, never you cease to work, because to do something is wired into us. You cannot remain not functioning physically, and I'm sure mentally. But the sea change that occurs is because now you know what is truth, what is real truth. So life goes on, but because of your inner self-realization, life remains the same, but not the same.
Yes, thank you, Uma. What Uma was quoting is a saying that is in the Tao Te Ching and also in the Zen tradition. Before illumination, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
After illumination, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
As long as you're embodied, it goes on. But she also pointed out that those who have made it to the top, so to speak, those who have made it to realization, they don't cease working. And that's why that last line of the song that I sang at the beginning, she is waiting to take your hand. Yes. She is waiting to take your hand. Yes. She is waiting to take your hand, children of her love. They do not cease working. And they are waiting for us to take their invitation.
Can I just add something
Please.
to that? And what Emma said, to be a self-realized person, to be enlightened, is to be, or one way to say it, is to be free of attachment. So chop wood, carry water, which I love that. Before enlightenment, when you're chopping the wood and carrying the water, you're doing certain amount of exertion and a certain amount of work, and you feel like you're working. But after enlightenment, you continue to make those exact same motions and use the body in the exact same way and the mind in the same way, but you're no longer attached to it. And it's easier because you're not attached to it. You're not attached to the body doing it. You're just kind of watching it happen.
Yes, and that's the key.
Yeah.
Just what you said. You are watching it happen. Yeah. And so that is the magic of becoming that witness awareness. As Sri Ramakrishna said, that which is beyond mind and speech has become embodied. And does various things. And as Saint Teresa of Avila says, it is only in us that God becomes so confused that he asks questions. We have confused ourselves for the purpose of manyness, for the purpose of being, creating, doing, and sharing together. So let us enjoy it. As Sri Ramakrishna said, you come to the mango grove, eat the mangoes. Let us enjoy it as we are doing now. This is a great joy from here. I hope it is for you too. And what is the reason for the joy? Because there's this feeling of the limitations being further away. More freedom, expansion. We're all practicing to become expert singers so that we will not be able to hit a false note.
I think Trina was starting to say something.
Okay.
Is it Trina?
Yes, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, then Amadas, yes.
Okay. In terms of when you said we go beyond good and evil, is that we go beyond defining things as good and evil?
It's simply that we've gone beyond duality, dear. That duality is good and evil exist within duality. There is a state, the Sanskrit term is turiya, transcendental consciousness, in which there is no longer any sense of duality. And so that's what's meant by going beyond good and evil. It doesn't mean that in the relative world, good and evil does not exist, and that we should be passers-by to the evil, except as we are able to be compassionate and serviceful. And of course, if we're doing our spiritual practices, we're much less likely to contribute to that evil. That's what the yamas are all about. But there is a state of being that is beyond, and it cannot be conceived of by the left mind. It can only be gestured of and spoken about in these clumsy ways. It's necessarily clumsy. The least clumsy is, of course, in the scriptures and in the testimony of such as Sri Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, Swami Vivekananda, and also in that beautiful book, Love Poems from God, the testimony of 12 realized souls who have gone beyond good and evil and see only the divine presence. Now they see it in its activities as human beings and remark on it. They see the relative and they mourn our entrapment here because they say it's only because you continue to do these things that you are entrapped. So, that get it, Katrina?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, Amadas.
For myself, this has been such a great talk for me, Shankara. I realized that after my dark night of divorce 2 years ago, I'm not done with the world, the relative world, but I'm using it to trigger my anxiety, fear, and my own issues so that I can resolve them, because behind those strong emotions, I see samskaras. And when I deal with those and get to the bottom of them, then I can chop wood and carry water without being triggered by the world. And that for me is the freedom of the chains to fully explore, complete the journey of a spiritual aspirant. To be in the world and not be triggered by it is, and resistance. Every time I find myself resisting, I go straight to it now, because there's something behind that. The world is fine without me. It doesn't need me, and I'm using it for my own issues, because if it's not internal to me, I'm not going to recognize it in the world. And I'm ready to be done with anger, anxiety, and all the flavors of fear, to focus on the journey.
Oh, very good, Amadas. That's what was meant by the phrase, a fearless, self-forgiving inventory. Taking that fearless, self-forgiving inventory. And yes, we've come to the world in order to experience it and then free ourselves from it. We come to the end of our tether. Enough already. Enough. But then we have all these, as Amadas just pointed out, we have all these samskaras to continue that manifest themselves in these unpleasant distractions like anger and anxiety, feeling like we're being taken advantage of, wronged. God said to Rabbi, God in the form of Allah, said to Rabbi, you will not see me until you can kiss the hand, kiss each hand that caused every scar on your body. as I said, in principle, it's simple. In practice, it's anything but is it worth it? Well, as Uma pointed out, there are those who have fulfilled the whole thing and overcome the world, as Sri Ramakrishna said, I've done the full 16 alms. But then what does he say out of his generous willingness to share his spiritual treasure, which is resident within us? He says, you have only to do 116. Great inconceivable penances are required for your realization, O Devi. This is what it says in the Chandi. Sri Ramakrishna did those great inconceivable penances. As it says in the evening hymn, how great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
So there are very few that can become like a Vivekananda or Ramakrishna or Ramana Maharshi or any of those saints. But is it also possible that there are some realized beings or souls that just are sort of incognito? So there are more realized beings than we can ever be aware of.
Well,
If we just have a-
Vivekananda says, absolutely so. He said they're there. Hanuman, it said that Hanuman is always with us. Christ is always with us. Ramakrishna is with us in his subtle body. But are there human beings that are incognito? Yes, yes. And by the by, in his talk, Christ the Messenger, Swami Vivekananda says, without qualification or reservation, it is the destiny of each of us to become a Christ. Now, what that means for each of us is infinitely impossible to define, because each of us is unique. But what does it mean to be a Christ? It means to be willing to sacrifice everything for the good of those who need it. So, and one time I was walking with Swami Swahananda describing a talk that was to be given about the theoretical, the philosophical construct of this, the Son of God as Christ. And Swahananda stopped and turned and said, we are each called upon to be a Christ. So how that will manifest for each of us, absolutely impossible to conceive. But the universe goes on for a long, long, long time. There's plenty of time for it to manifest itself. The day of Brahma is 14,000 billion years, approximately speaking.
Give or take.
As if we can conceive for one instant what the hell that means. I mean, but that's the number, something like that. 14,000 billion years. So we're less than 10% in, according to the cosmologists. 13.7 billion years since there was singularity and then there was manifestation. Anything else, dears? Anything at all? All right. Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the water.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. It's so good to be able to say that and say it with you again. It always felt funny to just say it by myself on the Zoom. So, for those of you who were able to join us here today, please come into the monastery. I know for a fact there are some snacks and there's tea, and if anybody wants it, we'll make coffee. So please come on inside. Be delighted to be with you.
And bye, lovely Zoomies.
Bye-bye, lovely Zoomies. Yes.
Bye. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Raji ki jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. Go forward in the loving and protective embrace, as in a loving and protective embrace of the divine being as our mother and father. Jai, jai, jai.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.